Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today. And yes, my name is Susan Winter Hall, and I've been here at the Folk Music Conference offering dialogue and instruction on accessibility for about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years now. And so today I thought to myself, it's kind of hard to keep coming up with new ways of saying the same thing. So, I thought, no, I didn't want to do that this time. And because I'm joined by some really awesome people too. And so before we get to my guest panelists, Peter and Sharon and Jocelyn and Raine, I'll offer a couple of comments about accessibility because, this panel is meant to focus on the facets of access. And it's been really, really interesting. Obviously, we are virtually because of COVID situation, and I hope people are keeping well. And I know too, a lot of people are really struggling with the changes that has come about because of COVID. And I suggest that, whenever you feel overwhelmed, to just, place your hand on your heart and remind yourself that right here, right now, you're okay, and wish for those that you love to be the same. And COVID has really made changed all of our lives globally, in fact, which is very unfortunate. But there's a thing called maybe yes, maybe no. Obviously this maybe no. Obviously, COVID is there's nothing good about COVID. But the one thing that I have noticed is I hear things from my friends. I hear them say, when they walk by a restaurant or a coffee shop, they just wish that they could go inside and meet with their friends like they used to. Or, they would like to be able to go to a music event and, in a venue as they used to. So they're really feeling the loss. And I can see the parallel for inaccessibility. And as I hear these comments, I think to myself, welcome to the world of disability. Because for many of us, this is commonplace. Many of us cannot access a venue to enjoy a wonderful evening of music or dinner. Um, and if we can, sometimes there's the backdoor approach, I call. And, with the backdoor approach, and I see Peter smiling because I'm sure he's used to this as well. You go through a lot of kitchens and different places that the general public would not go through in order to participate at an event. And in some ways, the virtual conference is a little bit like the backdoor approach in the sense that we're all coming to it from in a different way than what we would normally, or what most people would normally. But yet we're still able to participate and we enjoy it. And it's wonderful that it is happening. But there is that ever knowing that it's not how it usually is. So we're all experiencing that. And, the same as even with people, staying healthy. When you see people when they go out in public, oftentimes they might have a bad cold or maybe attend a conference when they really shouldn't because of, possible infection to other people. So COVID has really brought all of this to the forefront for all of us to really consider. And using that as the parallel in terms of, really bringing to mind the experience of many people with various disabilities. My hope is that post COVID, when COVID is hopefully in the rearview mirror, that we will kind of retain some of these lessons and some of the things that maybe has come to our awareness that might not have before. And the inaccessibility is, of course, one, because I'm sure that many people are feeling extreme frustration. It's like they can see the store, they can see the restaurant, but they just can't go in anymore. So, I mean, that's to me, it's just very much a good parallel to keep in mind. So, post COVID, I think we'll be able to take away some good lessons from that. So that's my take on accessibility conversation for this year. And although my partner says to me, talking about accessibility is like falling off a log to me, because of course I've grown up with it, the challenges that disability has provided me. But with it, we know with all challenges, there's always solutions. And I know a lot of the other panels I'm hoping will provide you with some of those solutions that they've experienced, because challenges are always never very far. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me. And I'd like to introduce Peter. Peter is from Winnipeg, which I like to call Winterpeg. So welcome, Peter. If you wouldn't mind giving like a little general, brief overview of who you are and what your experience with accessibility and festivals and venues, that sort of thing, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Um, I've lived my entire life in a wheelchair, and I've spent most of my adult life going to music festivals and music venues and all that. So I have that experience very much from the audience side or the customer side. Over the years, that's evolved into me using my other skills to help organizations and arts organizations do things like accessibility audits, look at legislation, look at their policies and procedures. So I bring that piece to the table as well. And I want to share with you some of the experiences that I've had recently working with local Manitoba arts organizations as they're looking at their venues and looking at things like audits and some of the issues that those raise. Now, rather than spending a lot of time talking about the basics like ramps and toilets, I'm going to make a big leap and assume that every festival and every venue that I'm talking to today has a place where I can sit, a place where I can pee, and a place that I can see the show from. So let's just assume that that's there. But for those that aren't part of the community, I want to tell you that although that's a very good thing to do, that's only a very small start of what festivals and venues need to do to make the experience a good one for me. So I'd like to spend the most of my few minutes talking about some of the other things that you can do to make the experience even better. One of the most important things is if you have those things that I just talked about and other accommodation tools, make sure everybody knows. Make sure that it's on your website. Make sure that it's on your social media. Because if you don't tell me, I'm going to assume that it's not there. So you might be missing out on a potential client or a potential customer. And once it's set up, it's not that difficult to do. But and I mean, I'm talking about explicitly say we have these many seats for people with disabilities. We have an accessible toilet. Perhaps we provide sign language interpretation and things like that. But there are other pieces too that I don't think that most operators think of. One of the things that really helps me is if I know the duration of a show ahead of time, because most people with disabilities don't have the luxury of driving an automobile and leaving the venue whenever the show is over. If I have a good idea of when the show is over, my parallel transportation that I have to arrange a week ahead can be properly scheduled. So I'm not either leaving a show early, which is the worst thing in the world, or waiting around for an hour afterwards because it ended much more quickly than I thought. And I mean, I've had, and I'm sure anybody that's been involved in this at all has had this kind of experience. I've been at sort of large shows where I arrive and find out that there's 3 opening acts and realize I'm never going to get to see the act that I came to see because I'm going to be past my transportation time by the time the 3 opening acts have ended. So just something they might not think about, but show durations are really important. But I think you can go much further than that as well. And I think one of the most, when I work with arts organizations, one of the things we always do is we do community consultations, because there's a saying in the disability community that Susan will know well, that says nothing about us without us. So I never assume that I know all the answers or the organization I'm working with knows all the answers. We always consult with the community. And one thing keeps coming up over and over and over again. People aren't talking about ramps and toilets. People are talking about customer service and customer care. So if you take nothing else away from today, what I'm going to say to every venue in every festival is have people on your staff that specialize in accommodation for people with disabilities. Have a contact point so that if I look at your website and I'm not sure for whatever reason this venue is going to work for me, I have somebody that I can talk to and ask questions to, and not somebody that's going to guess at the answer, somebody that's had some training and knows, no, we don't have a hearing loop, but perhaps we can provide you with a tablet that will do some of that accommodation, or what the other options are. And every time I do a community consultation, everybody tells me, if I think somebody is working hard to try and make a space for me, I'm going to be very flexible if they're going to be flexible with me. And it really helps. One of the great phrases that I heard recently and I love, and it comes from Sharon Lee at Tangled Arts in Toronto, is he calls this person, this compact person, the disability doula. And I thought that was such a great expression. And in some of my recent work, we sort of had the conversation that particularly in venues that are large or complicated, I would suggest you go as far as having a disability doula for the front of house activities to make sure that your customers and your clients are happy. And if you have a big venue that has people with disabilities performing, you probably need a back of house doula too. So that if I'm a musician and I'm dragging in gear and all that, I can talk to somebody about how do I get it best there? How do I get best set up? Who do I talk to if I need, if I need people there to literally lift equipment in? How do we do that? How do we arrange that? Yes, doing that sort of training and staffing up a little bit is going to probably cost you some money initially, but once it becomes part of the culture of the do for your festival or your venue, it will just continue, and you will continue to have people come back because they know they're comfortable and they know that somebody can answer a question. And I have to say, in all the years I've been doing this, there's very few venues that I go to where I don't have to really dig around to find out something like show duration. And I'm pretty persistent and I'll do that, but many of my community members won't. So they'll either get frustrated and won't go at all, or they'll go and miss part of the show and not have a good experience. So that's as much as I'm going to say for now. I'm certainly open for questions later, but I'll pass it off to my other panelists for now.
Thank you very much, Peter. You raised some very good points. And I like that term, the disability doula. I like that a lot. I'd like to next ask our panelist, Sharon, to offer her perspectives. And Sharon has the unique experience of also being a musician. So that is, it's obviously something I certainly don't know anything about, but would probably you'd have lots of experience in a variety of venues. So Sharon, please, jump in and give us your perspective.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much, Peter. That was so insightful, and it's just wonderful to hear your perspective. Um, my name is Sharon Riley. I am a Juno Award winner gospel singer. My choir is called Sharon Riley and the Faith Chorale. Um, 30 years ago, I was just maybe a junior in university, and I was in a horrible car accident where I was ejected through the back window of the car. And I was in the hospital for 1 year. I had to conceptualize how to stand and conceptualize how to walk again. I was in a wheelchair first for a couple of months. Then I graduated to crutches. And for 30 years or so, I have been walking with the assistance of a cane. Now, throughout all of that, I started the choir when I was in the rehabilitation facility. And so my father would take me to the different churches. And as Susan said, I had to go through the back door and be wheeled into the church. And it's just something I got used to. And I would direct from the wheelchair. And I would say my choir had a lot to do with my healing process as I went from one stage to the next, the wheelchair, the crutches, and the cane. And even when I would be in front of audiences and directing, I always felt somewhat empowered. I thought I would be treated a certain way, but people always knew that's Sharon. Sharon is going to direct, she's going to sing, and she's going to sing from that platform. And throughout the years of singing with my choir, when we sing at various venues, I will always request, can you have a stool for me? Because sometimes it's absolutely difficult when I'm standing. It's a lot of pain in my back, and I've got a disfigurement in my lower right leg, and I have a bit of hardware in my body. So as I've gotten older, and I am quite old, as I've gotten older, it's gotten worse in regards to pain. But I must say that I've got a lot of respect in regards to being an artist. I've done 6 or 7 shows at Fallsview, and every time I'm there, they will provide a wheelchair in the back the days where my leg doesn't feel too great, and they will wheel me straight to the side of the stage, and then I get up and I'll go with my cane, and then there's a stool available for me. When I perform with like different artists to sing background vocals, again, I always request that. I do know that there was one time where I had to say no to a gig because they only had the specific stairway, and I cannot go up a bunch, through so much steps. So I actually had to say no. They did everything in their power to see what they could do, but I was unable to do that gig. So if they had somewhere that was accessible for me, then I would have been able to be a part of that, gig. But that theater was a very old theater, and so there was no accessibility for me. Throughout my 30 years or 40 years of singing, I've had my challenges with the disability, wherein I'll be performing and I'll have a spasm in the moment, and then I'll have to look at the stagehand and they know, okay, Sharon's giving us a funny look, and quickly they'll kind of have to bring a chair in that moment. But it's just something that I've learned to live with. I must say I appreciate all of the people that I've ever worked with, because I've never, ever felt a sense of being an outsider. It's like, okay, they've hired Sharon Riley to sing. They know that she comes with X, Y, and Z. And that is something that I really often appreciated. even at Fallsview, they created a special cane and bedazzled it for me. And so that was great. So every time I perform, it looks like a prop, but it's something I needed to walk on and off the stage. So it has been a blessing. I've never felt a sense of, I don't know, I've never felt uncomfortable. Most places that I've been at, they have been incredible. And it's been and I've appreciated that. Most artists or venues that have requested for my choir and I to sing, they're always accommodating. Being an artist and being disabled, you know what? It's who I am, and I'm proud of it. And when I walk in and anywhere, I just feel empowered. This is who I am. I wasn't born like this. It happened when I was 26 years old. And I've just accepted it. And it's just, sometimes it's an afterthought because it's a part of who I am. And I stand boldly and I'm proud of having this disability, but it doesn't define who I am. So I continue to sing, I continue to perform when I can. And yeah, that's a little bit of who I am and what the disability and my struggles have been throughout my life.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you very much. That's so insightful because, you know, I don't know anything about the back of the house, right? So it's always nice to know that you're being provided the support that you need. And well, at this point, we've pretty much focused most on environmental kind of fixtures, if you like, you know, stairs, no stairs, wide doors, bathrooms, that kind of thing. So I'd like to ask Jocelyn to speak now and give us her perspective, because it comes from a different kind of perspective on disability. So Jocelyn, please go ahead.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you to both Sharon and Peter for sharing your stories and your experiences. I'm always honored in these spaces to experience the privilege that you allow, sharing these you know, otherwise very perhaps like difficult in the moment experiences, but the depth of knowledge that I gain, and maybe I'll speak on behalf of others here. I don't forget these personal moments and these personal experiences, especially coming from the point of view of someone who plans events with accessibility in mind, and also as someone who experiences a disability of like a different kind. So I know that in some circles, non-visible disabilities is not necessarily the term that that defines or you know, in an effort not to segregate disabilities. I work with ADHD, so that's my perspective, and certainly not one that I hear is people who experience it aren't always knowing, and so by sharing these experiences, hopefully this allows people not only to create experiences or events with everyone in mind, but also look at how they can better understand themselves also. So to start, I'm a visual artist. I'm also passionate about everyone having meaningful access to experiences. And Peter, I think you really spoke to this earlier. I borrow meaningful access from the Rick-Hansen Foundation, and their definition is so access that meets the real accessibility needs of all users of a site or a venue or an online platform, regardless of their abilities. And it recognizes that accessibility of for any given site or venue or platform is based on the entire user experience. So for the last 7 years or so, I've worked in post-secondary disability services, where we set up accommodations so students can better access their studies. I'm located in Ottawa, and I've been really lucky to work under, I think, some really incredible leaders, visionaries in this sector of accessibility. So in working with a whole team, because I would never claim that I do it myself, my role has primarily been community facing. So I plan and I execute orientation events, volunteer and staff trainings, and disability awareness events also. I then kind of moved into some mentoring on events, and then now consult on some committees and present on how to make events more accessible for people with all sorts of disabilities. And how does this relate to festivals? I think in working more closely and learning about the different disability categories that we serve, I was diagnosed later in life, so as an adult with ADHD. I'm 35 now, and I've been on this learning journey of how I access events and communications and music festivals and art shows for the last, I guess, 4 years in a more from a more personal standpoint. So I think this diagnosis helped me empathize from a different perspective, and one from deeper understanding of how, again, those non-visible disabilities can be better served, especially through communications and navigation in the events realm. I've applied my learnings to various community events for myself, so outside of my professional life, and was even able to participate as part of the accessibility team at City Folk for a couple of years. And that opened my eyes definitely to how, as a community, we really have the ability and the resources to make small little changes together by taking all of our minds and brainstorming together. I also acknowledge that we're all learning, and including me. So I think something that I usually, try and enter any experience with is just remaining open. And I want to always stay curious and always gracious in my effort, at least, to understand better other people's experiences. And I know that by doing so, and having other people doing so, that we're moving in some sort of right direction.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you. Yeah, and it's true. The invisible disability is something that a lot of us overlook because it's invisible. So that's very easy to happen. And I think where communication is concerned, that's can be a real problem for a lot of people. That how they process information is really important. And certainly, I think musicians would have a lot to say about that. And so that's a good segue for our next speaker, Raine Hamilton, who is our another musician on the panel. So Raine, please go ahead.
Hi, Susan. Thanks so much. My name is Raine Hamilton, and I'm a touring artist. I do not live with a disability, but what I have to offer to this conversation is my experience as an artist. I have worked at home and on tour to increase the accessibility and inclusivity of shows that I'm able to offer. So that's just something that's really important to me. I, just look at the world and I think, well, the world is for everybody, and art is for everybody. And it's the right thing to do, of course, to do the things that are within our power, at least, what we can to make the world for everybody and art for everybody. So that's where I'm coming from. So I've done work with various venues in my travels as a touring artist to increase the accessibility of shows, whether that means just being really clear about what information exists about accessibility. I've worked often with American Sign Language interpreters and artists to present shows that are more accessible to deaf and hard of hearing community. And also work in an inclusion lens of making bathroom accessibility better for people with different gender presentations and gender expressions. yeah, because like the world is for everyone and art is for everyone. I want people to have what they need, and like, doesn't that include art? I wanted to mention, yeah, just to echo again what I heard Peter say, which is something I've heard people say again and again and again from the disability community. And so this is like the advice I would give to any artist or any kind of venue person who does not live with disability, who is thinking like, yeah, I want to put my weight behind this. And that is that the adage, nothing about us without us, is true always. So as a community that includes, of course, also some like not disabled people, it's really important that we are working from the beginning of our plans with people from the community we are wanting to connect with and wanting to better serve. So that's important that that happened right from the beginning. And then another piece of advice for people in my situation is to seek and really accept feedback. So for example, some feedback I received early on, I did my first concert with sign language interpretation in 2015. And the feedback was like positive and good. And some people were saying like, hey, you know, this is good that you did this. And there's ways to hire and give work to more deaf people. And we were like, yeah, you're totally right. So then we just improve our next plan and we're able to collaborate with more deaf artists and to, yeah, get work to more deaf people and to do like better, beautiful connecting between arts communities. And it's just the way to go.
Well, we certainly like thinkers like you, that's for sure. We need to
Well,
clone
thanks.
you.
And I'm happy to talk with any artist who's interested
Yeah.
in just knowing more of what that was like and what some steps could be.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Raine. So I wanted to touch on a couple of things, like when you're saying the, nothing about us without us, which is wonderful. I'm glad you brought that up, Peter, because, I've been around the disability advocacy block so long that I forget some of the, standby things that really mean a lot because, I've just been doing this a long time. So that's really important. And, the one thing I can say about that is I've been on so many committees when I was younger. And I used to find it quite comical, really, that, sit around the tables and people would come up with new ways of like, differently able. They'd come up with these new terms. And then they'd say, well, what do you think, Susan? I'd be the only one with a disability on the table. And they'd say, rubbish. There's nothing wrong with having a disability. It's how we're thinking about it that's the problem. It's not the disability. So if I say I have a disability, I mean, I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. So trying to come up with a nice, tidy name makes no difference to me. Just maybe makes other people feel different. I don't know. So, I think the shame aspect of living with disability, and I know, Sharon, you spoke to that a little bit in the beginning, and how obviously now like you stand proud, and like I loved it when you were saying those things. It's like, yeah, right on. And you're right, Raine. I mean, the world is for everybody. And, when you think of it in inclusivity, you like to think of universality. And even though you might think, well, gee, those, like one thing that I can tell you, in my house, we have some raised toilets. They're a little easier to get on because they're not so low. And I can't tell you the number of people without disabilities that come to visit us, and they come out of the bath and they go, wow, I really like your toilet. It's just so, easy, and the safety bar and whatever. So it's like, even though it's obviously for accessibility, it has a universality where it's not a problem. And now the other thing, like Peter, you'd mentioned about, yeah, for venues and festival events, that yes, there may be some increase in costs here in order to have a disability doula or to have some audits done and make some recommendations. And they don't always need to be like, rip up the whole floor. There can be some, adjustments, sometimes not as expensive as you might think, more of accommodations really, but then they need to be audited and identified. And that may cost money. But one of the things that I think is that many festivals, I don't know about venues, but many festivals receive public grant money. So if they receive public grant money, I really believe that there should be a responsibility that the accessibility must be in place, because, what's the point in having all these years of advocacy and passing, the AODA. I mean, I like to think it's more than a piece of paper. So if a venue or if a festival receives public grant money, as Raine says, it should be for everybody. So I'd like to just open it up for some dialogue and some questions, and let's jump in. Okay, let's see. Oh, we have a question. So for festivals that might not be completely accessible to all, simply because they just might not know the accessibility issues in the community, how's it best to find out about information, polling the community members and that sort of thing? Yeah, that's a great question. Are there privacy issues? That's a good question, because that's one of the things people worry about. Like, they don't want to be invasive to someone's privacy and information. Like, what kind of toilet do you need? People don't want to talk about that. But there are ways that festivals can get this information. There's obviously, there's a lot of disability organizations, like March of Dimes. Peter, help me out here. I'm losing my mind a bit.
Well, there are many in your various communities. There are disability groups that you can find with a simple Google search that would be more than happy to have a meeting or a telephone call with you. It would, what I would like to see, and I'm not a festival organizer, so take this as you will. I would like to see festivals have sort of a community consultation group that they can work with on a regular basis. So if they're trying something new or they're thinking about doing something in a new way, they have a group that they're comfortable with that they can reach out to and get feedback. That really does include everybody.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And, and also some of that's available, I think, with certainly in Ontario, with the AODA Act office and independent living. That's what I was trying to remember, the name of the organization, because they're pretty, they're national. So that would be a good source for festivals to reach out to, the independent community living offices in their area. And then the other thing too is, there are a lot of trainings. I offer an online training for festivals and venues who teaches about the, actually the whole aspect, from accommodation to the difference between support and services, because I think that's something that people need to know about as well. So there is information out there, but I do think, looking for the most independent one, because you will get lived experiences from that. And again, it's unique. Every disability is unique because we're all unique. So when you hear that term, special needs, what are your special needs? I would say, no, they're just needs. They're not special, they're just needs.
Susan, I think something that I find really helpful when kind of approaching, a recurring event is often going back to, just like everyone here is suggesting, going back to the people that I know or I've heard speak before, reaching out to them with specific questions, and then they have a network of people who they might be able to put me in touch with. And kind of, I think, Peter, it was you said, or you suggested that you bring a group of people together. I think, at least from the point of view of like designing an event from beginning to end, is you always have, at the beginning of the event, you always identify ways to bring in and invite feedback along the way. And then at the end, you do some sort of report at the end. So you are able to capture where you began and where you where you're at the afterward. So then when you do come back next year, or at the next time that you throw this event, you have other avenues that you can tap into. And oftentimes, like when people are invited, this has been my experience, when people are invited to share their feedback, they, in a personal way, they will do so, and they're happy to do so.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think, Peter, you mentioned about, let me know, like, letting, put it on your website, put it on your promotional materials. I mean, when I see the little disability, wheelchair symbol icon on any kind of advertisement, if I'm scanning where to go, that's obviously where my eye goes first, because then that's the one big issue I don't have to worry about. So that's really good to put the information in a way that is marketable, and that's into marketing. And I think also too that there's a misunderstanding. I mean, the people with disabilities do account for a high percentage. What's it at these days? I think it's might be 4.5 million perhaps in Canada. I'm not sure. There's like 10 times more in the United States, but they're 10 times bigger. But I think the other thing too is that there's sales to be made for venues. And I would like to see more artists with disabilities be promoted and, receive the recognition that I feel that they sometimes don't receive. Because I know like a gentleman, I won't mention his name, who uses a wheelchair, and he's a very good singer, and and every time I've gone to see him, he's had to be lifted onto the stage. And he's very good about it, because obviously it's the only way he's going to get up there in most cases. But it's unfortunate that has not been rectified. And again, this is where the new what do you say, building permits and whatnot, like anything to do with any kind of city work, any kind of grant provisions, disability should be a part of the conversation. So, we have to keep fighting for that. Oh yes, Peter, thank you. 22%. You would be up on that. Can you tell us a little bit more, like, when you work with other organizations, are these the kind of information that do you find you have to convince them?
No, if organizations are to the point that they're reaching out to me for help, they've already made the decision that it's something they want to do and they want to learn how to do it better. But one point I do want to make, because there's been some discussion around it, people might think that people with disabilities are reluctant to be included or have those conversations. Those might be uncomfortable situations for the people without the disabilities. Those are not uncomfortable situations for people with disabilities. I beg you for the chance to talk to you about what my needs are and how you can make my experience better. Disability is not a bad word. I will talk to you about it all day long.
Right.
And I'm more than happy to give venues and festivals and anybody else that wants to listen my experiences and what's best for me, and other ways to build links into the community. As much as we all dislike these Zoom meetings and whatever, those kinds of tools in many ways have given us a new mechanism. I did a recent consultation where I was able to meet with 48 people over 4 days. It would have taken me weeks to do it all in person. It's like herding cats, but I had 4 1-hour Zoom sessions and got a tremendous amount of feedback.
Wow. Yeah. That's true. The virtual reality has really lessened a lot of barriers. I mean, most of my work now is global. I'm either in Singapore or Ireland or wherever, and because of my disability, that would be next to impossible to do all of that traveling. But Raine, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit, because you are a touring musician. And even though that you yourself don't have a disability, which I think is really admirable that you're here. So I really want to thank you for participating, because it's not a secret club where everyone's welcome. But when so
Well,
you
thanks for having
obviously,
me.
you have the eye, that you have the awareness. So when you go to a lot of different venues now, can you tell me, like, do you think there's more venues than not that have taken accessibility into consideration, or do you feel it's like the older places don't have it, the newer ones do, that kind of thing?
I've definitely seen, yeah, in my travels, because I have seen a fair number of venues, which is like a cool, proud statement. Definitely I see more thought put into accessibility in the newer venues. And I notice things like longer ramps, or just like a gentler, more cohesive design that includes the access infrastructure. Elevators more often. In older venues, sometimes there's a retrofit, like of some kind of ramp or elevator. But the older ones are definitely trickier, narrower hallways, things like that. And one thing that I have not often seen in my travels is access to the stage, wheelchair access to the stage.
Yes.
And that's something that is for sure we need.
Yeah. That's one thing I think is just totally overlooked for some reason. I don't know. I guess it's another level of expense, but particularly if you're building a new situation, kind of put that in the plan. But yeah, because that almost leads the assumption that people with disabilities wouldn't necessarily have talents to share, when that's certainly not true. So yeah, I think that's true. Let's see now. We have another question. So, could an accessibility rider be a valuable tool for presenters? Yeah, with that. Yeah, no, definitely an accessibility rider. Yes, I would think that's a really good plan. And okay, like, I'm not a musician, so I'm not really up on exactly what a rider might mean. But maybe you can speak to that, or Sharon. And what is you probably have to do this when you're giving your needs.
Yeah, and I was also going to speak to something that Raine said. Yes, I remember being a part of a musical, and theater didn't have access to the stage for me. So what they did, they literally built a little room for me with all these curtains so that I could change. And then it's literally on the same level as the stage. So I would come in and go to the room, change, and then I have the access to the stage. So there are people that, to Raine's point, that will work with you. And so I have experienced that. Yeah, going into these older buildings, yes, I have seen some ramps, that makeshift ramps that they've had. And forgive me, Susan, I don't remember what your question was. I was just remembering what Ray was saying.
Well, about the rider, someone was
the rider.
asking.
Yeah, well, I have a manager, and he always says, for the most part, it's really Sharon, our director. We need to make sure that there are things that are accessible for Sharon, for going on the stage, or if it's a huge building where there's a whole bunch of floors, there's an elevator. So my manager always includes that, and lets them know that there should be some sort of accessibility for me. We've done movie shoots where the choir is a part of a movie, and again, they have to build something by the staircase, because we're usually in a church scene. And so I have to be near the stairs in the church. So they build something for me to change into the robe, and where I can sit, because when you're on a movie set, it's like hurry up and wait sort of thing. So you're just sitting there. So they usually build something for me, which again, I really appreciate.
Yeah, and that certainly would be considered an accommodation. And I guess in the rider is where you make your specific needs met. I mean, maybe some people might ask for a particular brand of sparkling water, right? Whereas you might ask for no stairs. So, kind of like whatever your needs are. And they'd be special to both. So I really like to nail home that point that they're not special. We all have needs. So,
Agreed.
yeah. So now, if now for one last, let's go over one last round of, if you could see one thing, like let's not identify a particular festival or pick on anyone in particular, because I have, worked with quite a few of them, and I have to tell you that accessible festivals have been so receptive. It's helpful that many of them are outside, so that's helpful. But I've found like such a welcome feeling whenever I bring forward the idea of improving something, and making this suggestion, because it's great, and it's like Peter when you say, well, if a festival is reaching out for an audit or a consultation, so they already know they want to do better. But that doesn't mean that they know what to do, because obviously they don't have the lived experience. So having the opportunity to talk with those that do, and those that do in a professional manner, such as yourself and Jocelyn with the work that you do, then that's really important to reach out to those kind of professionals. But if you had to give one piece of advice or one thing that you would like to see changed, just one, to start, what would it be? Let's start with you, Peter.
I would say do that customer training. That's what keeps coming back, and all the feedback that I get. People don't complain about the ramps and the toilets. They complain that they arrived at the venue and the person they had to deal with had no idea where their seat was, and they went in circles 5 times to find their accessible seat. So if you do that customer training up front, it allows you to build that relationship, and it allows you to build a comfort level. And I am going to sneak in a second one just because it's been mentioned in the comments a couple of times about being invasive. People with disabilities don't feel invaded upon when you ask them how you can help them make their experience better. That's exactly what we want. You're
That's
not going to insult us. You're not going to surprise us that we have a disability or a particular need. We already know.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Well said. What about you, Sharon?
That I just want to just continue to go into places where you don't have to ask, oh, by the way, do you have this available? Do you have that? It's just there. So that, as Raine said, it's just about everybody is just as important. So I don't have to feel like the other. It's just as soon as I get to a venue, what I need is already there.
Right.
Can that just happen?
Yeah.
It's just there. So it's not a matter of asking or inquiring about anything. It's just there. And I just hope for that moment that we will live in a world where it's just, the accessibility is just endless.
Right.
That's my hope.
Yeah, when it's not even a consideration. Yeah, it's a given. Yeah, nice. And Jocelyn, what would you have to offer?
I think that it might even, I'm just kind of riffing off of Peter and Sharon here. I'm wondering if this might help here. I find that experiences seem to be, or challenges entering any type of venue or even online platform. I think I might be remiss to not mention online, just because who knows where we're going to go in the next few months. But as time continues and we have to offer online and in-person events, perhaps having an access hub, or so online, like if we're navigating a website, it would be a tab or a navigation point. And what that would require would be like an access advisor. So have someone on the team who's responsible for everything access. I know that there's been concerns in the chat about like privacy issues. That could all be addressed with having one contact person to kind of then disseminate responsibility on training all festival workers on how to work with people with disabilities. They could be in charge of inviting different experts into the conversation to make sure that what Sharon mentions, which is so important, is to not feel like when I'm asking for something for myself, I'm an inconvenience, even though I'm providing a service or a performance. Sharon, not to say that that's what you're saying, but certainly for me, I do feel that experience is, oh, okay, that whatever I'm asking for is an afterthought. So perhaps, that would be my suggestion, is to have one point person to be responsible for all things access, and to have a space, a dedicated space on the communications platform to share there.
Right. Oh, good point. Good point. And now, Raine.
Hi, Susan, could I please ask you to repeat the question?
Sure. If there was one thing that you could recommend or, wish that festivals would, do to make things more accessible, what would that be?
Oh, well, I think it's wise to seek collaboration with artists with disability or deaf artists, and then to have their presence really help to shift just the inclusion, the vibe of inclusion of the whole event.
Right. Great. That's great. Okay, well, I think we're pretty close to our closing time. I want to really thank everybody for your participation and your wise wisdom and your unique experience and your perspective, and for sharing it with us, everybody in the virtual world who might be watching. And I want to thank the Folk Music Ontario for continuing to bring the conversation to the community. And I just have to say, I truly really appreciate that they do that. And it just speaks volumes to the commitment that I see in place for the music artist profession. So thank you very much. And thank you all for attending. And I'm not